You on your podcast?
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Maple Minds podcast. Today, we're going to be talking about Bill C-5. But first, I would like to acknowledge the land in which I live, work, and play, and that is the homelands of the Lekwungen speaking people, the Sanghees, and the Esquimalt nations. Maple Minds podcast recognizes that we broadcast across Turtle Island and we show respect to everyone's territories. And Calvin, please introduce yourself and the territory you're from.
My name is Calvin Stevens. I am from the territory that's traditionally Mi'kmaq unceded territory from Nova Scotia. Um, and yeah, that's who I am, where I'm from.
And if you are Mi'kmaq or anybody from Cape Breton, you'll know that I'm here on Vancouver Island, but the Superior Island is Cape Breton.
Yes, yes, yeah.
All right. So let's get on with the show. It has been a difficult couple of weeks. I know for myself, and I know from other um, Indigenous peers that I work with, we feel that we've been blindsided by the Carney government. We worked our butts off to get votes out to the polls to get the vote. And now Bill C-5 has been pushed through the Senate and the House of Commons with little to no consultation with Indigenous nations. Carney has stated he is prepared to meet with Indigenous leaders, but he's dividing the Indigenous community of Canada. He's meeting with First Nations separately, the Métis Nation separately, and the Inuit Nation. How do you feel about that, Calvin?
Um, when I first heard about it, um, I was in shock knowing that this was pushed through with such lightning speed. It didn't give anybody time to really process it. It was decided on both the conservatives and the liberals, and whenever both of them agree on something, it's never really too good. Um, we worked, as you just stated, very hard to push Carney during the federal election, and his rhetoric was meaningful consultation and reconciliation and work with partnerships with First Nations. It was right through his campaign. Uh, Everything felt good when he came in as prime minister. Those were the first words out of his mouth. When the king came to speak in parliament, the same words echoed, and then you get slapped in the face with this legislation. And so, as a First Nation, you really feel betrayed because this legislation has undone all the court cases that First Nation people have fought in the Supreme Courts for the last 50, 60 years to recognize our treaty rights. And it's all been undone in this legislation. It, I, we have Bernie Francis. He's a senator from Prince Edward Island. That's Mi'kmaq. And we have Dan Christmas from Member 2 here in the First Nation community in Cape Breton that were wholeheartedly against this legislation. And they were asking for language to be included in this legislation that stated.
Oh,
We went down for a second. Are you still
yeah,
there?
we did. Yeah, I'm still here. Are you
Yeah.
still here?
Yeah, we went down for. I'm still here.
Oh,
We went down for a second. So, Bernie Francis, a senator from PEI with some full-blooded Mi'kmaq, and Dan Christmas from Member 2, he's also full-blooded, was against this legislation, and they were trying to push for legislation or language to be included in this legislation that included free and informed consent, which would protect our rights under the recognition of our rights under the 1982 Constitution. But it didn't succeed. They still pushed it through without that language. And Jamie Batiste, he's a Mi'kmaq from my community, voted in favor for this legislation. He voted against First Nations, and he voted against all the hard fought court cases that his ancestors fought for, um, which is simply despicable. Even if this legislation was going to get passed out of integrity, if I was in his position, I would have said no to it. Um, yeah, it's this legislation is opening the floodgates for any legislative body, whatever it's conservative, uh, to take advantage of the legislation because the way it's worded, the way it has such gray areas, it can be taken full advantage of. We are setting up this country legislatively to be taken over and have our system crumble from within for oligarchs and for billionaires to take over and end up like the United States has. This is the Trojan horse that will allow that to happen. Um, it doesn't have language in there that states like the not withholding, the notwithstanding clause that has an expiration date of 5 years. So you can use and abuse that legislation if you had a corrupt government, but it has a 5 year limitation. So everything that's done has to be undone within those 5 years. This legislation does not have an expiry date on any decisions that they take place. So any government can basically come in and say, no, this has to be done, this has to be done, and it doesn't matter what anybody says. That is, I don't know if it's designed that way or I don't know, but think about it. Um, any projects of national security or national interest, it can override any treaty right, can override consultation with First Nations, can override the Constitution of 1982, which recognizes First Nation rights. But it's not even only about First Nation, it's about provinces' sovereignty too.
Yeah.
This legislation overrides and slaps provinces in the face, which is kind of a good thing considering the actions of the Alberta Premier and the Nova Scotia Premier and the Ontario Premier. But this legislation will also screw over those good independent provinces
Yep.
at the same time. So
Uh,
I don't know.
I would just like to read a couple of definitions right from the Act. And so people understand what the Act says word for word.
Yeah.
So
Go for it.
indigenous people has the meaning assigned by the definition Aboriginal people of Canada in section 35(2) of the Constitution Act of 1982. And that's all it says. Which is very frustrating. And how is that going to be interpreted by the government? No consultations. They're going to declare everything in the interest of the country and just take the rights away from Indigenous Canadians.
Yeah. I looked at the legislation, tried to figure out if there's a clear definition of what constitutes as a project of national interest and
Mhm.
national security. There isn't a black and white definition. This is why I am screaming this legislation is a Trojan horse because they can turn around and say anything is of national interest. This is the requirements, as long as it strengthens the autonomy and resistance and security of Canada. Well, anything can be constituted as that. It has to have an economic benefit to the country. It has to have a high success rate. It has to advance Indigenous people's interests and contribute to clean growth. But look at it from a colonizer, from the perspective of somebody that's not First Nation. They put us in residential schools in our best interest. They put us
Hmm.
in reservations in our best interest. When the government does not consult and make decisions for us, it's never in our best interest. And this legislation gives them the permission and the right to do that. That's why I'm saying 50, 60, 70 years of hard fought court battles was undone by that parliament. And I understand why they did it, but they could have added language in there that protected this legislation from being abused.
Absolutely. All they have to do is add a clause where development is going to take place. Indigenous nations have the right to refuse those projects. And that's black and white. It shouldn't be, oh, it's national interest and therefore it supersedes the rights.
I
It's,
think Dan Christmas and Bernie Francis from PEI, the senators, uh, they were only asking for one piece of language to be added into legislation, which was free and informed consent.
yep.
All of that one simple line would have prevented abuse of this legislation to be taken place. Let's take, for example, fishing. Fishing is a very contentious, hot topic here in Nova Scotia. What's to stop the government from coming in and saying, it is your best interest that you fish within our parameters, the parameters that we tell you how to fish for your own best interest, because it falls under uh, the framework of this agreement, because it's in your best interest. We're telling you it's in your best interest, so you have to do it now. And they will force other First Nations to follow non-Indigenous fishing plans. See, this legislation is a nail in the coffin for First Nations.
It's
People
not
just don't.
just, yeah, and it's not just consultations and taking rights away. This is going to increase our missing and our murdered. Anywhere that there's been a man camp, we have more people go missing. We have youth being trafficked in these camps, not to mention the addictions that have happened, in these camps. And the government needs to be proactive rather than reactive. As you know, Calvin, like many times, many of our communities and nations are constantly going from one crisis to another. They don't get a breath to become proactive. It's always reacting to the moment.
No.
What
When you
government needs what government needs to do is put a clause into these contracts, these projects that are of the national interest, and charge so much money that can be given to the nations and given to support groups to stop the genocide of violence.
um, this is a legislative war on total control of Canada. Um, and I'll explain that. So, the United States is having a civil war right now, but it's not the civil war that me and you or a common person would think of. Wars aren't fought on the battlefield really anymore, other than the Middle East and places where they're trying to secure assets over the land. All battles are fought now through technology, the internet, cyber, um, psychologically, misinformation and disinformation. They're fought legislatively from within. And this is what the United States is facing with a big, beautiful bill. This is the big, beautiful bill for Canada, for fuck's sakes. But people don't realize that because we're so caught up in our regular day to day lives that we don't see it. We don't know it. We trust these politicians to do the right thing in the best interest of the people. But did the politicians in the United States, did they do the best interest? Did they act on the best interest of the citizens in the United States? No, they did not. Um, it's a very scary piece of legislation. I don't think people realize the magnitude that this legislation has in the future. Um, I'm very, very disappointed. Uh, this legislation, I know, was passed because we are facing a very real threat of the United States coming after us physically. And we do have actors like Tim Houston and Doug Ford and Daniel Smith that are increasing their rhetoric, and Alberta becoming the perfect excuse to liberate, to come in and to liberate a province where that would kickstart the annexation of Canada. Um, this is not a joke. The United States economy is in shambles. Its dollar is not backed by anything else other than its reputation, but that's gone now. So they need the resources in Alberta, and they need our water, and they need our uranium, and they need the oil in the Arctic to stay afloat for the next 100 years. So this is a do or die
Yeah.
thing for the United States. And I understand the Carney government passing this legislation. They want to get prepared. They need to get prepared to protect Canadians. And they did not want to risk slowing down any projects that would increase the autonomy and the security of Canada in preparation of such a day, because it is coming. Don't fool yourselves by thinking it's not. Stop burying your head in the sand and wake up and look at what's going on all over the world. It is going to happen. And the Carney government, he's a crisis manager by trade. This is what he's doing. He's managing a crisis. But in doing so, he's also set up the Canadian government legislatively to be taken full advantage of by the next government that isn't Mark Carney. That is the one thing that he is blind to. He's so focused on securing up our border, to securing our defenses, that he does not see legislatively. He just screwed this entire country over into the future.
Exactly. Now, you and I have spoken outside the podcast about Grand Chief Cindy Woodhouse. You and I were both pissed off royally when she stood with Doug Ford and who gave a very disingenuous apology in his remarks about our people. She released a statement in regards to what happened in the Senate and Bill C-5. So I'm just going to read it, if that's okay. We lift up the senators and members of Parliament who spoke out in favor of First Nations rights during the very narrow legislation window provided for Bill C-5. In particular, we thank Senator Paul Prosper, who introduced an amendment to have free, prior, and informed consent expressly included in the bill. We also recognize the 28 senators who voted in favor of this proposal. Despite their support and Canada's claim that free, prior, and informed consent is at the heart of this bill, these vital references remain absent.
Oh.
Okay, so we also lift up the First Nations right holders who have been speaking up about Bill C-5, despite being turned away and uninvited by parliamentary committees. The hard discussion is moving to the next stage, but the honor of the crown is still at stake. Canadians and parliamentarians should know that First Nations are entitled. Our rights are not for sale. Last week, Prime Minister Mark Carney agreed to host a national gathering with First Nation right holders next month in Ottawa on Algonquin territory. Right holders are patiently waiting to have their voices heard. The Assembly of First Nations will organize a second national virtual forum with chiefs on July 10th to discuss the amendments made to Bill C-5 and the next step. We also consult with elders and accelerate plans to host our annual General Assembly on Treaty 1 territory in Winnipeg, Manitoba on September the 3rd to the 5th. What do you get out of that?
She needs to get her ass fired. I don't like her. I don't know her personally, but her actions, standing next to Doug Ford, just I could never forgive her for that. And I'm sure she's a great person, but when you stop looking out for your people and you become a token Indian to stand next to a person that's taking out the the rights of your people, you've lost all of my respect.
Well, she lost my respect before she even was appointed an elected Grand Chief.
This is the thing. We typically vote. Typically, First Nation leaders are elected because of their inability to recognize what is going on, and the easier they can be controlled, the easier it is for them to get elected. And unfortunately, that may be the case with her. She might be just a puppet for somebody. I don't know.
Well,
I can't speak to it personally.
we saw that actually with Chief Rosanna Archibald. She was trying to bring integrity into the AFN. She was cutting back some financial gains that members of the AFN were getting, and they turned around and stabbed her in the back.
Yeah.
And we lost one hell of a chief.
Yeah.
I had the opportunity to spend time with her personally, and she was very astute and very vocal on the issues facing First Nations, Métis, and Inuit communities.
Yeah,
And it's sad.
our systems are corrupt, very corrupt. Parliament is corrupt. Our local band elections are corrupt. AFN, if they're voting that way, is corrupt. Her statements are to save face because all the senators were voicing their opinion on this bill. So she's got to look like she's important. She's got to look like she's defending First Nations. So she's gonna make an announcement based on what these senators that actually give a shit of what our First Nation people are going through, and copy and paste it and say, "Oh, look, I'm important. I also agree with these senators." What a bunch of bullshit.
Absolutely, 100% agree with that statement.
Yeah.
You know, and not only that, as Grand Chief, she should be going to the Inuit leadership and to the Métis Nation leadership and saying, you know what? We need to come together on this, not be divided. And that's the game they're playing.
Yeah. Like I said, I for the life of me, I've known Jamie Batiste, or I don't, however you want to pronounce it, but we call him Jaime, for the life of me, I don't understand how this man could have voted for this legislation. I know it's a matter of national security. I know the United States is coming for our asses, but you're sacrificing your own people for this legislation. I know, granted that if Canada can't prepare properly, then our rights and First Nation rights and First Nations in general doesn't exist anyways. But you
Mm.
could have pushed for legislation with free and informed consent. I am sure that First Nations all across Canada, if they were proposed with the goddamn truth and told, oh, look, we are going to get invaded. We have to shear up Canada. We need your help. We need to get this project passed. It's either we pass this project or Canada falls. I think 100% of First Nations would have went with this project. But instead of giving faith and giving integrity to First Nation communities and trusting them to make the right decision, they took away that trust from Indigenous people and brought it upon themselves to make that decision for us. And what does that remind you of? The Indian Act, residential schools, all of the bullshit that they've tried to push on us for 100 years, and we're still here. It's being done again.
Yep. It's my heart broke when I saw that, three matriarchs that we celebrated being appointed as ministers all voted yes in this bill.
Yeah.
It just boggles my mind. I feel like it's Pierre Poilievre's politics.
See, the thing is, these politicians, like, they follow the pack. Like, a lot of these politicians really don't know shit.
Mhm.
They run because they have a good chance of coming in. So a lot of these politicians really don't know shit. They just go with the crowd because it's a free paycheck, and really that's all they do. They just it's a popularity contest, and it's all about numbers.
I
So
just
with
sorry, I just want to take a second to read some comments from Absorbed One because last time they had a lot of input on this in the comments, and Paddling My Canoe, you weren't here, and so I just want to pass this by you, and you can't see TikTok. So Absorbed One says, just let me see if there's more than these two comments here.
Okay, you look for those comments, and I'll just finish up here.
Okay.
Do you guys remember when Mark Carney brought all the premiers together? And
Yes.
after that meeting, Doug Ford was like, "Oh, he was like Santa Claus. He was like Santa Claus coming," because Mark Carney came in and said, "Doug Ford, your Bill C-5 in Ontario, mwah, love it. Now we're gonna take it to Parliament."
Yep.
They fucked us over.
Okay, so Absorbed One says Bill C-5 dash, whereas the Government of Canada is committed to working in partnership with provincial, territorial, and Indigenous governments and Indigenous peoples. Whereas the Government of Canada is committed to respecting the rights of Indigenous peoples. And I think she's talking about the provincial bill.
Yeah.
I think. Whereas the Government of Canada is committed to respecting the rights of Indigenous peoples, recognized and affirmed by Section 35 of the Constitution Act of 1982, and the rights set out in the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. So Absorbed is someone that I know that is really good at reading and understanding legalese. Like, I do know that about Absorbed One. Part 2 of the bill, she writes, that's part 2 of the bill, copy and paste. And she wanted you to know that, Paddling My Canoe.
See,
Is she Indigenous?
Yes.
yeah, but the thing is, there's nothing in the legislation that it's legalese is always made out to be sound good,
Mm,
but in practicality, it's a loophole. Without actual concrete language that states it has to have free and informed consent, you're shit out of luck. You can add as much fancy language. We will recognize the indigenous, right? We'll have a partnership with indigenous people and we'll work together. But without fucking language that states that, you're fucked.
Yeah, she just
Exactly.
posted. She said that someone had said that we weren't in the bill at all, but not me, but because I'm like absorbed one's indigenous. Um, so so I don't know if you want to clarify that it does say that indigenous people are in the bill.
What do you
I
mean?
read. I just read the definition of Indigenous people word for word from the bill. Do you want me to read it again?
Of course, we're in the bill. I'm lost here.
Yeah, so I don't understand the question.
Yeah.
I wish I could bring absorbed one up.
What is the context of it? Because of course we're in the bill because it states that. Well, it's because of the 1982 Constitution, our rights are recognized, and because our rights are recognized, we have ownership of the land, and so um, we have to have consultation for anything to take place. So it would make sense to be in this legislation because they are overriding that aspect of it, but add in pretty language and saying that they will work with us, but they are not mandated to work with us anymore under this legislation. They don't even have to consult with us anymore if they decide not to.
And our
I'm going to try to figure out a way to see if I can get absorbed one
Yeah,
up
that would be
here.
cool.
yeah,
If because I'm pretty sure like everybody's open to understanding. So if she's up
do you
for it.
want
Oh
us
yeah.
to get off YouTube and go over to TikTok?
No, I'm gonna see if I can figure out how to send her the link
Context.
to
Everything has to be
YouTube
context, right?
because yeah, absorbed one. Do you have me on Facebook?
It is a concrete charter quote.
Would you come up, absorbed one?
Pat to Wear is really good on legislation too, and a few people did some videos on it, and it does have pretty and Path is good. He is really good at research and stuff. So I'm looking forward to his videos there. Contexts the bill.
Context is still the bill.
I don't know. I don't know.
I want absorbed one to
Pat,
come up.
same here. Same here. And Path is very analytical. Like he is very, very. I will let you know when. Okay. Thank you, Path. Yeah, he's very analytical. He's very good at researching, and he's very good at legalese language.
Mhm.
And but when I looked at this bill, I have some legalese language because I was a negotiator for several years of contracts. So when I read some legalese language, you can state one thing in one section and leave like a back door open. And this is what this legislation does. It fancies and kind of makes it concrete, but over here kind of
Oh, you know
undoes
what?
all of that.
I know. Hold on. I will. Sorry. I'm gonna. How do I make us blank for a second here? One sec.
Also, it's going to create provincial tension because this legislation can be used to overreach provincial sovereignty too. You know, like it's like I said, this is this is the big bill. This is the big beautiful bill Canadian version for me, anyways.
Absorbed one. I am sending you. You don't have to be on camera. I'm sending you the link to the stream
Okay.
on
Pat,
on Discord.
Pat says, and we do, and it has the ability to be amended. I think our energy should be spent on trying to advocate amendments for that bill, especially to add language of free and informed consent. That is probably the biggest thing that needs to be added, and all our energy should be focused on trying to get that added.
I'm not sure if Absorbed One said that they would do it yet. Hopefully they will. We'll see.
Hopefully they will, because I don't understand the questioning.
Yeah, I need
Yeah.
context.
And, we want open dialect and, people to express their opinions. So
There's quite a few
please,
people.
Absorbed One, join us.
There's quite a few people not agreeing, but remember, this is not a fact-based program. This is all opinion-based, right? So,
Yep.
but if there's somebody who has facts and they want to straighten it out, for sure, like come up and let us know. I mean, bills are really hard to understand. I don't know bills. I don't read them. I think you need to be almost a lawyer to understand them, because ands and ors.
It can be really, really freaking annoying to read legislation because even some legislation, the new legislation will start out pretty cool and easy to understand. Then it'll be like reference this, this, and this legislation, this, and this. And so you don't have context anymore of what the legislation you're reading. You have to go to another legislation to get context and go back to this legislation. Then the second line, there's another legislation being cited. It's BS, personally. She's getting ready to come up. Cool.
Yeah. I can edit out all this longness. Sue, how was your day today? No, Steve, you're not. You're not. I think if people are not agreeing, and it's a lot of people who are not agreeing, then I think we need to have a conversation about it.
Yeah.
Right? Like, because it is hard to understand bills, and some people understand more than others, or some people might have but I also think that this conversation should be Indigenous, right? It should be people who are Indigenous to have this conversation with each other so that they know what's going on.
And I would personally hope that those that don't agree, and that's their opinion, they don't have to agree with us. Go and read the bill.
I personally take the side of Dan
Okay.
Christmas and Bernie Francis from PEI, the senators, and they specifically stated that this is a betrayal of Indigenous people and reconciliation.
And then also people have different opinions. Absorbed One is here, so I'm going to bring Absorbed One up.
I 100% agree with that. Being of the Mi'kmaq people, I am going to listen to our knowledge keepers and our elders.
Well, they're lawyers, right? And
Exactly.
they're on the Senate.
Yep.
Good afternoon,
Hi.
ladies and gentlemen.
Hi.
I don't think I've ever done TikTok through this. Well, no, that's not true. Back in the day with Joe, remember when we do games?
It's YouTube. Yeah, I remember.
Oh, YouTube too. Okay. Yes.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining us.
No problem.
And hopefully we're not understanding your question, so please explain.
So it wasn't a question. Someone had made the statement earlier, way earlier in the live, that we're not even mentioned in this bill. And I was like, but we are mentioned in this bill. We have a whole section actually, right? As most bills. And I agree that, the government can be problematic when it comes to, sitting at the table with us. Absolutely. Are they improving? Yeah. But this live is feeling a lot like Chicken Little, like the sky is falling. And I don't I'm from Ontario, right? So I have a bigger problem with Doug Ford's bill than the federal bill. The federal bill, I think, is well written and actually protects a lot of our rights. And I don't, until the government decides, like, does something wrong, I'm not going to be one of those people that the sky is falling, especially when the sky is actually falling in Ontario with Doug Ford's bill, right? So we are respected in this bill. We are brought up in this bill. We are, it is concrete. They bring in Section 35 of the Constitutional Act. So whereas Doug Ford completely ignores us. And as a person who lives in the Ring of Fire or just slightly outside the Ring of Fire, that bill is much, much more concerning. And that bill, I think we all should be very worried about, because I believe other provinces are going to follow Doug Ford's footprint if they have a majority government.
Oh, I totally agree with you on that one. I think
Yeah.
I said it before on here live that Doug Ford is setting the precedent for all other
100%.
provinces to follow suit. But what I don't agree with is even though this bill is a lot more softer, it includes us and includes the section on section uh, the Constitution Act of 1982. It includes it, but there is like when you make a contract, when you write legal language, you have to mention it, but you also have to have teeth in the legislation to enforce that. And this legislation mentions it, but there's no teeth to enforce it. That's the same thing with the legislation in Canada to recognize the United Nations Declaration of Indigenous People. It's
What teeth would
pretty.
you like in
It's
the bill? Because the
yeah,
bill can be amended, as someone pointed out. All bills can be amended. What
and that's
more
what we're
teeth would you
hoping.
like in the bill? What would you like the bill to say?
I would love the bill to say include free and informed consent. That is,
So your problem is just that it doesn't say free and informed consent. That's it? You just
oh
want that in there?
yes, I definitely want that in there. But
Without putting that in there.
because this is the thing, without free and informed consent, you can uphold the rights of First Nation people or try to uphold the rights, but without that statement, you can say, well, we tried, sorry, but what it still is an economic benefit to Canada, and we feel that this is beneficial to Aboriginal people, so this is what we're going to do. um, Basically it's going back 100 years telling us how we should do, how we should believe, and how we should live our lives.
And in the bill, there's only one little paragraph on Indigenous people. It's not a whole section.
Yeah.
It
It
is a
is
whole section. It's part 2. It's called Building the Canadian Act, the enactment of the act. Like, I'm literally reading the bill. It's right in front of me. It is a whole section. It is, I can count the paragraphs for you too. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 paragraphs, small paragraphs, but there are 6 paragraphs, not one. And
okay.
it definitely lays out the work for free and informed what Kelvin has. They just don't word it in that exact way. So Kelvin would
that
like it worded that way, and that's fair. That's a
that's the
fair. You
thing,
could ask the government to do that.
and
where
that's what the whole, that's what we're trying to do, is to provide um, attention to it so people ask for that. Because I'll tell you one thing, when
But
legislation is written,
mhm,
hold on, when legislation is written, it's never perfect at the start unless it's designed to be that way. And when it's designed to be that way, it allows for people to take advantage of the legislation.
that's fair. Loopholes, yeah.
Simple words as shall or may.
Yeah. I have a
Totally
question for
two
both of you, though.
different, totally two
can
different meanings with
I
legal
do have a
language.
question, though.
can
So
I
this
ask
bill
you a
is
question
clearly
though
really
first, please?
important to you guys, but there is definitely a section about being consulting us as a people, right, as a sovereign nation. Doug Ford's bill doesn't have that. Why aren't you fighting about that?
I did. I was upset about that. spent I don't know how many hours on this live wailing about that act, but you're missing the point. They took the bill from Doug Ford, polished it up, and introduced it into Parliament.
And we have been
And
vocal about Doug
shoved
Ford.
exactly and shoved it down our throats. Um, I guess we have a little. I don't know about you guys. I have a little bit more experience with this stuff, and yeah, unless it's written in black and white, right there in legislation, then it doesn't mean shit. Because when it
Exactly.
comes down to it, you're going to go with the legislation that's right in front of your safes, and you're going to look at it, and you're going to look at the context of what's going to happen and what's happening, and say sorry, it's not included. Yeah, it's kind of mentioned here, but yeah, I'm sorry, it's not. So that's why we have to pressure the government to add language to it. Because let's say Mark Carney, maybe he doesn't get elected next time, and Pierre Poilievre comes in and sees this bill, gives Donald Trump the high five, and let's get shit done. So
Um,
you know,
Do you
are you
truly
going?
believe
Are you
Canada's going to
willing
be
to?
annexed?
Are you willing to risk that because they forgot to put some specific language in the legislation? I'm not. I'm
Can we
not
just,
willing to risk my.
sorry, can we give paddling my canoe a second? Because,
Absolutely.
yeah,
Absorb one. I was just trying to find out where you read the report that you just mentioned, because I'm in Bill
I'm
C-5
reading the
and
bill. It's in Part 2, Building Canada Act.
Absorb one.
Preamble.
Can you send me a
Yeah,
link? I can put it up
sure. Okay. It's like right on the government website.
on
Copy.
okay, I have it here.
Yeah,
I just needed to
and
scroll
I can
out.
send it to you too, Polly.
yeah. Thanks for coming up, Absorbed one,
No problem.
and
Oh,
adding
I
to the
don't use Discord very often on my iPad. It's all
Oh.
good. Hold on.
Let's go. Yeah, somebody in the comments is agreeing with me. Like
Oh
the
no,
interpret the
what
the
did I
language
do?
doesn't represent what it's supposed to. Like, you know what?
Mhm.
I
I think
just
it's
don't.
just a discussion. I don't think, I mean, it's really hard to figure out. Like, people really, really, really need to realize that the bills are very, very, very confusing
Yeah,
to get through,
yeah.
right? So one person's interpretation might not be another person's interpretation. So people need to get together, talk about it, share the information, and look it up. And I
That
think
is
that's
that is the beauty with law. And this I should have went into law. The law is who can interpret the legislation better than the other side.
Yep.
And that's who wins the case. And
absorbed one.
that's why legislation is always written in a way that it's not
Oh, where'd she go?
there's go- and
Oh,
that's
I
why it's
scrolled
written
out. Sorry.
that's
and
okay.
that's
I do
why
that all the time.
legislation is always amended over and over again, because
But
lawyers do look at this and they look at it, yes, there's a loophole. I got it.
I'm not sure, like, yeah, a lot of bills are vague and open to interpretation. And these interpretations are based on judges. Like, if eventually they go to judges and judges look at it and say, oh, maybe this needs to be changed or whatever, right? That's why I'm sitting here. I'm so confused because I don't know anything about this bill. I mean, I should know about it, but so
And
that's why I'm really appreciative of Absorbed One coming up and I'm really appreciate you guys having this discussion, because as somebody who doesn't know, this is very helpful to me.
Can you say something earlier that I really liked, by the way, and it actually does happen at least for my area, about mining companies paying reserves? That happens here.
Okay, what's your question on it? I have a lot of
It wasn't a
knowledge on it
question. I
too.
was just making a statement that I really like that idea for that to happen for everybody, because it does happen for my reserve. We are paid. It also employs many, many of our members. And they do consult with us. They absolutely do consult with us and the two other reserves in the area.
Yeah.
What
You
I
do.
meant not a
You
sorry, what I
do.
meant not about being money being put aside from those contractors was
Mhm.
more specific for work camps and education and programs around murdered and missing Indigenous people,
Mhm. So we don't have
right?
work camps at our mine, so thankfully
Okay.
it's
Well,
locals. Thankfully, we do have people who come from out of town, but
Oops.
they live in town and whatnot. We don't actually. They have considered putting one in. I'm pretty sure we're going to fight that, and it's not going to be
just
allowed.
just so your reservation gets royalties or whatever from the
Hmm.
mine. Let
We
me
do.
just I know a lot of First Nation. Is it Pepsi?
No, it's Sprite. Sorry.
Okay.
It's too late in the day for caffeine for me. I'm a lot
and,
without the
and
caffeine.
and
Okay,
let's
so
blow that myth. Not all Indigenous
Yeah.
people like
Plus, Coke is
Pepsi.
better.
Yeah, absolutely.
Coke is
whatever,
better.
lady,
That's why it's Sprite.
whatever. Pepsi's still the best. But let me caution you on this. These corporations, they will tell you, they will consult with you, and they will promise you the world. But you have to realize that these corporations are um, limited liability corporations. So it's fine and dandy, and it's a very beneficial partnership when things go right. But when things go south, people and First Nations,
It's been a
and
very beneficial partnership for both them and us for decades,
that's,
so it's okay. We're fine.
yeah. So yes, okay. But I'm trying to explain to you, okay, when it does go south, people on First Nations are going to be shit out of luck, and they're also the first ones to be screwed over. So, what I would suggest to you is check if these companies are limited liability companies. And what that means is an environmental disaster happens, or a cave in, or anything to do with cleanup with natural drinking water, or pollutes the environment for your nation, these limited liability companies can claim bankruptcy, and none of the stockholders will be held responsible. So basically, they can just pack up and go and leave the cleanup and leave the mess to Indigenous people and those people in the provinces. Daniel Smith is introducing the green. I don't know what that mining company is called in the north face of the Rockies. That's owned by a company, or a businesswoman from Australia. And all these companies, and all oil companies, are ran on limited liability certification that states that if something goes wrong, they just pull out and screw everybody over. So, yeah, it might be a beneficial agreement now, and it might be right to the very end. But as soon as the company starts losing money, they're going to pack up and go. They're not going to help you reclaim the land. They're not going to help you recover anything. That's just the reality of limited liability companies. They're there to rape the land, throw a little bit of money around, which benefits some Indigenous people and benefits the province by providing employment. Well, they're making billions off of our land. And then once the land stops producing money, they say, go screw yourselves and walk out the back door.
Absorb one. I have a question
Hmm.
for you.
Sure.
Um, we're talking about what projects are going to be deemed in national interest. Do you have any thoughts around that?
It'll
Because really,
all
the
be the Ring
government
of
could,
Fire.
yeah,
100%, the Ring of Fire. 100%.
that
They're
just,
coming and they're going to dirty my water. 100%. And it won't, but it won't be on the with the bill 5, the federal one. It will be with the Ford one. They don't need the federal one to do that. Ford already
Yeah.
he already put the bill in to destroy Ontario, right?
Yeah.
mhm.
Um, I like me, and again, I'm biased. Again, I am like 2 hours out from the Ring of Fire, right? Um, so I'm super biased, right? I'll
Yeah,
fully admit that, right? It is very frustrating for me to know that like Ford's bill is much more concerning to me than this federal one. I got to tell you, right? Like I kind of get like truthfully, I think the federal one is to run the pipeline through Quebec. They can supersede Quebec. And Quebec doesn't want the pipeline, right? That's what I think this bill is for, truthfully. This is how I feel, right? Ford's
No,
bill?
it's just
Ford's bill is super dangerous for Ontario.
it's this legislation is not just about the pipeline. It's partially part of the pipeline, but it's also about the military bases that needs to be established in the Arctic. It also is anything to do with infrastructure, the mining of uranium. That's going to be a priority. That's in Nova Scotia. Doug Ford's bill is basically just laying the groundwork as a test run for the federal legislation. So Doug Ford, like I've said it before, Doug Ford's bill is a basically just a test case for all the other provinces and the federal government to do what they're doing.
We have Bill C-15 here in BC, and it's very similar to Doug Ford's bill. And a lot of the chiefs have been standing up and being vocal, but the government still, again, pushed it through.
Bill
And they've already
C-15 for which province?
BC.
Sorry, I don't know. BC? Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I don't know that bill. Sorry.
So it's another provincial bill that came out before, Bill C-5 was ratified, and permits have already been issued to a couple of gold mining companies. And these companies in the past contaminated water on Indigenous land.
Mm-hmm.
And again, there was no consultation before EB and his cronies passed this bill.
True story. That's very
Yep.
true. They did after, but not when they did it. Like they
Nope.
Yeah.
And they wouldn't amend it. The chiefs asked for an amendment, and they refused.
Mm-hmm.
So,
with the grand scheme of things, all the rhetoric of us moving forward together, of respecting Indigenous rights, was all for show. Was all to, and this is why a lot of First Nations feel betrayed.
that's why we have to get together. We need to start our own party.
Yeah. They just basically, even though they can have 20 sections on First Nation rights in that bill, unless you have something concrete that says we have to have free and informed consent, doesn't mean anything.
Yeah.
I would vote for an Indigenous party.
I wouldn't
Same.
vote on an Indigenous party purely because it's Indigenous. I would vote for it if it represented what I believe in as well.
Exactly. And I don't mean it's strictly Indigenous. When I say that, I mean Indigenous values.
I figured. I'm thinking, how many people do I know that
that's
would actually run?
Not only
but
that, and we've had this conversation before, how many of our Indigenous people will just be puppets?
Yep.
Just like our Grand Chief of AFN. I'm sick and tired. You know what? I'm sick and tired of politicians like that. But it's not only AFN that has that problem. It's almost every single band all across Canada has that problem. But it's not also there. It's every single provincial government. It's every single freaking federal. It's the federal. Every single facet of a democracy, you're going to have puppets and only certain people pulling the strings within those organizations. And it's just the nature of politics. It is what it is.
And
But I'm sick and tired of them. I am so sick and tired of politicians like that.
Since we were the ones that worked so hard, as communities, Indigenous communities, to get this government elected, we stated, I know, Calvin, on many occasions that we were going to hold those ministers' feet to the fire. And I think it's now that we have to act. We need accountability for them.
Yeah.
As to why they're allowing this to happen. Again,
can you help me with my memory? I can't remember. Oh, this is so embarrassing, and I'm so sorry. It's because I have such a bad memory. Every time we had a protest, you stood up and you said a list of Indigenous not laws, but no.
The grandfather's teachings?
The teachings?
Maybe.
Me?
No.
Oh,
It listed off a whole bunch of things that indigenous communities support. I
yes,
think.
Duncan. I agree.
What was that list again?
It's the grandfather's principles, and it's different from nation to nation, but very similar. So it's love, respect, honor, strength. What am I missing, guys?
Sorry.
You know,
Huh,
trust,
I don't.
Duncan,
What have you said?
integrity.
humility,
Sorry.
humility,
Humility. Yes, I'm very
Humil-
humble right now.
humility. I
I'll be
think
right back.
there's seven. There's seven teachings.
Yeah.
I think I got them
Yeah.
all.
Oh my God.
But
Yeah.
it's really what Christian people will say that's the commandments in the Bible. But
Yeah.
right across Turtle Island, these are the principles that guide most Indigenous communities. And that's what we have to look at. We have to bond with other communities and politicians through this. It's the only one way that we're going to get ahead.
Yeah, that's what makes me want to follow Indigenous. Like if an Indigenous
Mhm.
party had this, that's me. That's what I want to be. I would like to be, I would like to be in that world, that
That's fair.
culture,
Yeah.
Like,
Well,
You don't need to be indigenous to follow the teachings, by the way.
no, you don't. If they're
Just to
open
be a
to
good
anybody.
human. Yeah,
Yep.
just be a good human. That's all we ask.
You know.
Walmart's trying to get me to buy things.
Our people are so loving. I was at a conference last week and I had the opportunity to sit with some elders, and there was an incident that happened. And the elder told me, in his nation, he has to bring two gifts if somebody has harmed him because we're raised to forgive. And it's such a beautiful principle. And we as
yeah,
Canadians can't even agree to disagree anymore respectfully, let alone bring those who wronged us gifts.
I'm
That's true.
hoping. Sorry, I totally forgot the conversation. What you guys were talking about.
we were
Sorry.
talking about the grandfathers. Help me again.
Teachings.
Sorry, teachings.
Teachings.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Anyways, hopefully the grandfather will talk some sense into these politicians. Moving forward, I'm hoping when there's time to make amendments to this legislation, they take place, because it's going to be critical. Because
Yep.
this legislation, if a government took full advantage of it, can screw a lot of people over. A lot of people. So moving forward, I know why they introduced it, because we are facing a really grave threat from the United States, and not a lot of Canadians are accepting the reality of the global climate right now. So I know why people passed the legislation, despite it being written the way it's written. But it's coming up to almost 7:30. We said that
Yeah.
we're only going to be an hour.
Okay. So I guess if you want to close it off, Paddling Mike, can you?
I'd like to thank everyone for joining us. And if you want to be part of this podcast and you have a topic, please reach out. We want to hear your voices. I want to emphasize again that our opinions are that. They're just opinions, and we are respectful for all. Remember to like, share, and join us next week.
Yes, and
Thank you
Duncan
for having
on
me.
TikTok, I don't trust the United States either. I don't trust any politician too.
Okay, thanks for joining us, everyone. We're going to close down TikTok first.
Thanks for having me, Polly.
Thank
Thanks for
you.
being here.
Absorb one,
I'm a lot.
absorb
I
one,
know.
come anytime.
Thank you. I could be a lot. I know. I'm sorry.
That's okay. That's
I
respectful
talk super
dialogue.
fast.